Please sit down. I'm feeling like a president. The last time I came here, I struggled. But before then, for several reasons, personal reasons, the number 7 is special to me. It is reflected in most things that I do. My birth date contains the number. And during my international footballing career, I wore the number 7 jersey. My first 2 children were born on the 7th day of May and December. And I can go on and on. It's been 7 years to the day since I came on this podium and delivered a speech. I replayed it a few days ago and could not believe that that was actually me. I recall that when I entered this hall, it was so packed that I panicked. I dumped my 25-page speech that I had spent the entire night struggling to write and foolishly decided to speak from the heart. Well, I have moved up. Now I'm going to be reading from my phone. I got away with it the last time, very narrowly. No one noticed that I rambled through the subject matter, going from one story to the other. Storytelling was my get-out-of-jail card. I was familiar with those stories, and I entertained the audience like a dribbling footballer. All that I did was to recall as many of those stories as possible, and people forgot the topic. I must have made an impression on that day. That's why I believe I am back here again this morning. Let me remind you, the topic then was, sport has the power to change the world, to change Nigeria. Just to confirm that the impact of my speech did not go beyond the doors of Covenant Nation. Despite the loud ovation that followed my speech on that day, Nigerian sport has not changed to this day. Our Super Eagles are still struggling to win even the easiest of matches at home in Nigeria. And the country does not seem to have the foggiest idea what to do. Anyway, for some reason, sport is never considered to be a priority in Nigeria. I can understand that, because on the surface of things, there are bigger, more important, and more critical challenges facing governments. Sport cannot be seen as one of them. After all, is sport not just play-play? Every Nigerian is an expert also on football matters, and yet the country keeps fielding politicians to lead its football administration. They forget that politics and sports do not go together. And the failure of Nigerian sports administration is the clearest evidence of that. So my speech the last time fell on deaf ears, ended up in the dustbin. Incidentally, at the same time, everybody in the world considers sport as special. That's why in the Olympic Charter, sport is presented as a global tool for the promotion of peace and friendship and for the resolution of conflicts between nations. Of course, sport has other immense benefits. Economic catalyst for massive infrastructural development, making the people feel good whenever their team wins, and uniting them like no other social activity does. Sport is a conundrum, a very complex activity that must be handled with utmost care because it has two sides to it. It creates bridges across divisions and boundaries, religious, political, and cultural, constantly demonstrating its power to bring people together through competitive games where fair play, strict rules and regulations, and a level playing field for competitions test athletes' ability, skills, and the limits of human physical capacity. At the same time, it can bring a whole civilization to its knees. Following my last appearance here, like a smart player, I am adopting the same winning formula that won Pastor Oyemade's heart and made him to recruit me again this season. In order to navigate today's topic, I will adopt that same formula. Pastor Oyemade suggested the topic of today to me as his preference. I jumped at it. When your coach fields you in a match, you don't go asking him about the system to play. He tells you. So I will not even start to pretend to be some kind of expert on the subject of the role of sports in geopolitics, global geopolitics. It is academic, and I'm not an academic. I'm a football player, period. Since I know Pastor Oyemade liked my last presentation, I shall play safe. I shall extend my message of 7 years ago a little bit further. Tell some nice stories about my little knowledge and personal experience on today's subject and hope to impress him again because I want to come back a third time. Great footballers love to play safe and take the easier and fastest route to goal. Probably that's why legendary radio commentator Ernest Okonkwo nicknamed me mathematical. I always calculated the easiest way to scoring a goal. So, what role for sport in global geopolitics? Pastor Koju Oyemade is like Jose Mourinho. He will not just prefer a straightforward, easy topic or answer. He will like challenging topics that challenge you, like challenging matches. There must therefore be an interesting catch to his choice of this topic. So I have to navigate very carefully. I will start by going into my mathematical calculations. Politics and geopolitics must be different. Who does not know that sport runs on strict rules and regulations, and that politics run on lies and confusion? It is common knowledge that sports and politics, therefore, do not mix well. They avoid each other like a plague. So why does Pastor Oyemade seek to know the role sports can play in global geopolitics? It simply means that there's a thin line of difference between politics and geopolitics. I go to find out. I am right. The pastor is very clever. Geopolitics is the combination of geography and politics, the political relationship between countries. So now I understand. The world is in crisis. The world needs healing. How can sports use their power to heal the world? I immediately recall the articles in the Olympic chapter of the essence of sports. Just give me a minute because I'm reading from my phone. It's not easy. I wish I had papers today. I'm there. I went to my fourth Olympic Games, and I did not participate because of the interference of politics. Then I went to my second Olympics without qualifying for it, and I participated because of the interference of politics. There's no role in sports for politics, but the power of politics of sports can be drawn upon to play a role in geopolitics, the political relationship between nations. Because of the lazy understanding of sports and their power, many countries, including Nigeria these days, go to sleep and do not elevate their appreciation and application of this power beyond recreation. If you tell an average Nigerian now about today's topic, they will likely ask you what the topic has to do with the Super Eagles and their qualification for the World Cup, or what it has to do with the price of fish in the market. Those are the things that matter to them now, not politics or geopolitics. After all, what's the difference between Panadol and paracetamol? They don't see the difference, just as they don't see the connections. That is my task this morning. The world deliberately chooses to forget a few times in history when the genie was let out of the bottle, when sport left its sacred place in the Olympic Charter, took on the cloak of some geographical causes and disrupted the equilibrium of the world. It must interest us all here that the world has deliberately buried one such moment in history, probably because it involved Africa, led by Nigeria and Tanzania. The world does not want to go back to 1976 and open Pandora's box again after the experience that I want to share now. For the first time in Olympic history, Nigeria and Tanzania led Africa to deploy sport to unite the continent and fight against a grave international injustice. That action was an eye-opener, confirming the power of sport. It sent shockwaves unseen before then around the world. It was former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Dr. Andrew Young, that painted the full picture and connected the dots between the killing of over 200 black students on the streets of Soweto between June 16 and 18, 1976, and the events of July 18, 1976, when Tanzania's Julius Kambarage Nyerere and Nigeria's Olusegun Okikiola Obasanjo orchestrated and spearheaded the first boycott of an Olympic Games in history by 27 African countries, plus their sympathizers, Iraq and Guyana. Nigeria and Tanzania led the protest boycott in Montreal, Canada. The action made the 1976 Games the worst in Olympic history. It was a monumental financial disaster and a catalyst for the disruption of the next two Olympics. The world was going to lose its greatest unifying agent, sport, to geopolitics. At the same time, the boycott fast-tracked the release of Nelson Mandela from jail after serving 27 years of a life sentence. It hastened the end of apartheid in South Africa, in Namibia, and in Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe, and made possible the election of the first black president of South Africa. Sport, the genie in the bottle, had been let loose by African countries. The rest of the world could do nothing about it, a demonstration of its power. Well, I was a freshly minted graduate, undergoing my national youth service in the Green Eagles, the national football team at the Olympic Village in Montreal, Canada. A day to the opening ceremony of the games, all 45 of us Nigerian athletes were sent out of the village, bundled into a plane, and flown back to Nigeria. It was our worst nightmare, but a huge sacrifice to make for a just cause against racism of the worst kind. That boycott by African countries was so effective as a tool of disruption that the USA copied and deployed it 4 years later in 1980 at the Moscow Olympics. They led 64 other, mostly Western countries, to boycott the games in protest against the 1979 invasion of Afghanistan by the USSR. 4 years later, the USSR retaliated by deploying the same weapon to spearhead a 14-nation boycott of the 1984 Los Angeles Games, this time by mostly communist countries and their sympathizers. Geopolitics. Sport as a weapon of protest and change bared its teeth, and the world sat up in fear and shock. Since the world started to avoid mixing any form of politics or geopolitics, for that matter, with sport. Even beyond sport and veering into other soft power tools, 1 year later in 1977, Nigeria, the undisputed leader of the black race on earth at the time, hosted the biggest assembly of black people in history. First Act 77 happened around here in Lagos, with 58 countries of people of African descent assembling to celebrate their history, art, dance, drama, music, traditions, film, culture, and literature, with symposia by scholars from around Africa, defining and shaping the way forward in the war of civilizations. It marked a watershed in African and black history. It was clear that Africa's strategic deployment of these tools is a very effective way of joining the global conversations and extracting respect and a place on the table of negotiations. The West halted that progression by rabid propaganda and economic sanctions that halted the movement started in 1976 and 1977. First Act never held again in that scope and magnitude. The West declared it as fetish, barbaric, and a return to ancient satanic practices. There has not been any sports boycotts of the magnitude and effect of 1976 again, confirming the superpower's appreciation of the power of sports deployed by Africans to change global political arrangements. The world is in a dangerous place right now. There are wars and conflicts everywhere: economic, social, territorial, religious, industrial, tribal, environmental, cyber, and so on. But do you observe also that in the middle of all these senseless global conflicts, the scramble for minerals and ruthless carnage all over the place, warring countries are still participating in international sports, competing against one another, and fighting to win trophies and medals. A few days ago, India and Pakistan, at war with each other for decades, with their cannons still booming and killing along their borders, were in Dubai playing against each other in the finals of the Asian Cricket Cup. Do you know that Israel, at war on several fronts in the Middle East, are still participating in the qualifiers for the 2026 World Cup? Do you know that Ukraine are also playing in the qualifiers for the same World Cup, despite their raging war with Russia? Even in our fractured ECOWAS in West Africa, all the countries are participating against one another in international competitions without any issues. In the Sudan, the Congos, the countries in the Horn of Africa, they are all participating in various international competitions and playing against each other as if sport is immune from the raging wars around them. There's something about sport that defies logic and ordinary comprehension. No one is saying it, but the voices that are calling for the ban of some countries from major international competitions at this time are few. They are isolated, and they are doing so in whispers. No one appears to want to disturb the tranquility around sport. Even the United Nations is silent, too afraid to introduce sanctions into global sports politics. The effect of such introduction is unpredictable and could be catastrophic. The power of sport is awesome and is not often and openly discussed. But it is there, simmering beneath the surface like a volcano. The USA is going to host many of the matches of the 2026 World Cup, the most prestigious and lucrative single sports event in the world, involving 48 countries. At the same time, the country is passing down laws and regulations that make entry for persons from certain countries difficult and expensive, if not impossible. Why are FIFA, the United Nations, and even the International Olympic Committee, custodians of sports, shying away from making any pronouncement against the USA? Or is it a case of power past power? Just imagine what would happen had this been another country doing this to the USA. The world would have ended. Well, I'm treading now where angels fear. I want to propose a role for sport in an imagined new world order. But permit me to digress a little first to explain the authority with which I am doing so. A major development in my life since the last time I was here on this podium is that I met Professor Osa Osagai, one of the most brilliant political minds in the world. He was the VC of Igbinedion University at the time. We became very good friends. Then he left Okada and was appointed the Director General of the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs, the think tank of foreign affairs and international diplomacy of the Nigerian government. For some reason, he was determined to justify my appointment of over 3 decades as sports ambassador of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, a ceremonial tag without a role or place in the diplomatic firmament. With him and his team at the NIA, I was given a platform to share my experiences and perspectives. My eyes were opened to new horizons on the relationship and additional possible relationship between sports and diplomacy, and how sports can be a soft power tool to impact and change the world. Professor Sagai must have been so impressed that he honored me with an associate fellowship of the Institute, which is what AFNIIA stands for. When you find it after my name, listed amongst several non-academic titles, including one vexatious one, MON. The federal government in 1981 forgot to add the EY. I hope President Bola Ahmed Tinubu will be reminded that I'm still around and waiting for the MON that we have EY. During one of the several lectures that I listened to in that citadel of international relations, I heard Professor Bolaji Akinyemi mention and explain the concept of an imagined new world order. It has become a reality. There are ongoing realignments of the superpowers, particularly following the emergence of a new American president, the wars and conflicts in several parts of the world. There's a geopolitical rearrangement that reminds us in Africa of the Berlin Conference of 1984, when Africa was the menu for the colonialists. And the Cold War years following the end of World War II in 1945, when Africa rose in rank and became the waiter at the table of the neo-colonialists. A new world order is afoot as we speak, and the powerful nations of the world have started their geopolitical alignments. The big concern for us in this part of the world is Africa's place at the table. For too long, the world has expected Nigeria, by its size, population, human capital, and mineral resources, and a history of lead roles in African politics, to lead the continent at the table. Kenya's legal luminary, activist, and prolific speaker, Professor PLO Lumumba, has words that are haunting. In one of his lectures, he says that Africa, to be led by Nigeria, must be present in a united front, on an equal keel, and speak with a common voice, or will perish. How can this happen when by all regular measuring indexes, Africa is still only an emerging force for the future? We forget, however, that Africa is doing exceedingly well in several varied sectors, and at par with, and may already be surpassing, the other civilizations in sectors that Professor Akinyemi described as soft power in diplomatic lingo. Areas that the superpowers conveniently and quietly forget, following the bad experiences they suffered in 1976, when Africa came together, deployed sport in protest, and successfully disrupted the geopolitical equilibrium of the world and changed it. In one of his great documented speeches, Madiba, late Dr. Nelson Mandela, said, "Sport has the power to change the world." He saw it in the transformation of South Africa. At the NIA, I shared my Olympic experiences with an audience that included Professor Bolaji Akinyemi some 3 years ago. At that event, Dr. Allen Onyema heard the pathetic story of how we lost our once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be Olympians to geopolitics, how we were never remembered or documented, and never celebrated nor acknowledged for 47 years. Allen Onyema, the chairman of Air Peace, resurrected that story of 1976 and has since erected a permanent monument in honor of the 47 Nigerian athletes to Montreal, Canada, in the form of a wall of fame within the premises of the NIA. He gave all the surviving members of the Nigerian contingent a limited number of free international flights on Air Peace to any part of the world, and unlimited free flights to any part of Nigeria for the rest of our lives. It may be the greatest reward in the entire history of sports in the world. Professor Akinyemi listened to some of these experiences and consequences of deploying sport as a political soft power tool. He said that had he known when he was DG of the NIA about the power of sports to influence change in the world, he would have had additional novel prescriptions for Nigeria in setting some of our future international diplomatic agenda around sport. So, we have seen the capacity of sports to checkmate the geopolitical games of the superpowers and to earn Africa the respect to sit at the table of negotiations in a new world order. Africa must come as a superpower of a different kind too. A few days ago, Botswana, a small African country of less than 3 million people, went to the World Athletics Championship and in 2 unforgettable races, planted its name forever on the map of the world, winning the 400 meters event as well as the 4x400 meters relay ahead of USA and the other superpowers. Another African country, Kenya, came second on the global table at the championship. A Nigerian girl is the current world record holder in the 100 meters hurdles event. She broke the world record twice on the same day some 2 years ago. Tobi Amusan is still Africa's beacon. There are several other Africans across the continent excelling in sports and dominating the world. These are no mean achievements. They are Africa's investment in the over $2 trillion global sports economy. Just imagine for a second that Nigeria's Super Eagles qualify for the World Cup. And Nigerians are debarred from attending by some regulations designed to achieve narrow geopolitical agenda by one of the host countries. This will be contrary to the obligation of every hosting country to fans from around the world, particularly for a country that qualifies. Were that to happen, would anyone question what sport has to do with geopolitics anymore? Or whether the economic benefits that the World Cup would bring to a country would not affect the price of fish in their local markets? Africa, led by Nigeria again, must be ready to revisit the tested geopolitical alliance of 1976 if the need arises, and make a global statement that at the World Cup, we must all celebrate the freedom and equality of all humanity. The continent must rise with one voice and in one accord to confront such injustice at the table of civilizations in this imagined new world order. Now, my dangerous thought. It is very important for the Super Eagles to qualify for the 2026 World Cup so that Africa can have a voice. So over to you, Victor Osimhen, Lukman Ademola, Troost William Ekong, Nwabili, Tolu Arokodare, Simon Moses, Olaino, Tobi Amusan, Anthony Joshua, Ese Brume, and the rest of them. I thank you very much.